Imagine, for a moment, every continent vanishing overnight and Africa alone remaining. This isn't just some theory, but the new map of the world. In the first sentence after that disappearance, the story is actually pretty simple. What breaks first, and which countries step up to rebuild everything that was lost? Scenario 1 starts with a rapid collapse, but then there's a fast, gritty recovery led by specific nations using their natural wealth to repair, protect, and then power a new world. Within 72 hours, global shipping just collapses and imports stop. Ports like Durban, Lagos, Abidjan, and Mombasa fill up with idle ships and, honestly, a lot of unusable containers. Aviation grinds to a halt as jet fuel supplies and spare parts dry up. Satellites and international communications become unreliable because ground stations and multinational operators are gone, and the backbone of the internet fractures into national and regional networks. The immediate crisis is all about fuel, medicine, semiconductor components, and finance. Nigeria and Angola, both rich in oil, pivot from export models to national refineries and domestic fuel distribution, prioritizing hospitals and transport corridors. South Africa, with the most advanced industrial base, converts mothballed plants into repair hubs for turbines, generators, and medical equipment. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Botswana secure and protect copper, cobalt, and diamonds. But what matters now is refining. Congo and Zambia rapidly build modular smelters and battery precursor plants near mines, using engineers trained in-country to turn raw ore into battery cathode and copper wire instead of just exporting raw material. Morocco and Algeria, sitting on abundant phosphate and massive solar potential across the Sahara, begin immediate production of fertilizer and grid-scale solar panels. Egypt repurposes its ports on the Mediterranean and Red Sea to become supply and logistics centers for North and East Africa. And Cairo's universities coordinate medical research and vaccine production for the region. Kenya and Tanzania secure East African maritime corridors and expand Mombasa into a manufacturing and logistics hub. Ghana and Ivory Coast, masters of cocoa and agriculture, prioritize food processing and seed banks to stabilize nutrition while expanding agro-industries for export inside the continent. Within months, strategic rail lines are prioritized. Lagos to Abidjan, Dar es Salaam to Lusaka, Cape Town to Windhoek, creating the first real intra-African heavy freight corridors. From months 2 through 5 years, the pattern is actually pretty predictable. Countries that control energy, minerals, and arable land convert raw advantage into industrial capacity. South Africa becomes the continent's advanced manufacturing and research engine, focusing on vehicle assembly, medical devices, and semiconductor packaging using recycled and refurbished equipment. Egypt and Morocco share leadership in large-scale renewables and heavy industry. Morocco's phosphate-to-fertilizer plants and solar farms stabilize food production and power coastal metropolises, while Algeria develops gas-to-liquids plants for transport fuels and petrochemicals for African plastics and construction. The DRC and Zambia become battery and copper hubs, with regional training centers teaching metallurgical skills and battery chemistry. Nigeria's oil wealth funds sovereign investment in schools, ports, and shipyards, and Lagos emerges as a financial center, issuing asset-backed credit based on mineral and agricultural production. Botswana and Namibia build value chains for diamonds and uranium into advanced materials and nuclear medicine, while Angola invests in ship repair and coastal logistics. Ethiopia and Rwanda lead in light manufacturing and IT services. Addis Ababa becomes a continental airline and logistics hub for cargo and maintenance, and Kigali's drone and software firms coordinate last-mile deliveries and precision agriculture. By year 10, a new reality has formed. Refined minerals, batteries, solar panels, fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, and food processing circulate across the continent instead of flowing outward. National currencies are stabilized by new asset-backed bonds tied to predictable outputs like fertilizer tonnage, refined copper, and energy megawatts. The African Union, now transformed into an operative Pan-African Council, coordinates cross-border infrastructure and disputes, and a few regional federations emerge. A West African techno-industrial bloc anchored by Nigeria, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire. A southern manufacturing and mining bloc anchored by South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia, and an East African logistics and agriculture bloc anchored by Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. Scenario 2 imagines a faster, more coordinated pivot, where the collapse becomes the spark for immediate, large-scale industrialization and continental governance. The first week sees emergency summits in Addis Ababa and Cairo, where technocrats and engineers draft a 3-year plan, prioritize fuel and power, secure food chains, and build local semiconductor and medical production. South Africa leverages its universities and existing factories to stand up rapid prototyping labs for microchips and sensors, while Morocco and Algeria scale solar manufacturing and grid storage. The DRC and Zambia partner with Botswana and Namibia to fund continental battery gigafactories and secure supply lines for copper and cobalt. Nigeria uses oil revenues to underwrite a continental shipping and rail company that finances new shipyards in Lagos and Luanda. Egypt opens a new spaceport program with Moroccan and South African partners to rebuild satellite capacity for communications, weather, and geospatial mapping. Kenya and Rwanda build resilient fiber and mesh networks that knit regional education systems together, producing tens of thousands of repair technicians and applied scientists. By year 5, this coordinated approach yields visible results. Hospitals in Johannesburg and Cairo, performing complex surgeries with equipment built on the continent. Solar farms feeding cross-border grids. Fertilizer factories in Casablanca and Port Said preventing famine. And battery plants in Lubumbashi powering regional transport. Countries adopt cooperative industrial policies. Resource-rich states invest in downstream processing in neighboring countries, creating jobs and stability. The most powerful political consequence is narrative control. Without external actors to extract or impose terms, African governments can prioritize royalties, local ownership, and sovereign-run development banks that fund long-term projects rather than short-term concession payments. Cultural industries flourish in Accra, Lagos, Dakar, and Johannesburg, and art, music, and film begin to define global culture, now told by the people who own the means of production. Scenario 3 is quieter and patient. Stewardship and deliberate preservation. In this version, the immediate shock is met with a cultural choice. Countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and Ghana take on custodial roles for global knowledge. Cairo, Alexandria, and Addis Ababa pledge to protect libraries, digital archives, and museums. Botswana, Rwanda, and Namibia build seed vaults and biodiversity preserves. The DRC becomes the guardian of the Congo Basin, focusing on freshwater security and sustainable forestry, while developing local pharmaceutical research from endemic plants. South Africa and Morocco invest heavily in education and medical research, creating centers of excellence that trade knowledge across borders rather than competing for dominance. Economic growth is slower but stable. Nations focus on resilience, community-based agriculture in Senegal and Mali, agroforestry in Tanzania, commercial fisheries regulated by cooperative treaties off the coasts of Senegal, Namibia, and Kenya. These countries built networks of small modular reactors, geothermal and hydro projects to generate reliable local power, and they prioritize long-term conservation as an economic asset. In this future, Africa accepts the moral weight of being the repository of human culture and biodiversity, and invests accordingly. Global exploration programs and grandiosity make way for repair and memory work, and a generation emerges that defines success as stewardship and cultural transmission rather than territorial conquest. Across all 3 scenarios, the map of power changes, but not because Africa is poor. The opposite is true. Africa's minerals, food-producing land, fossil fuels, solar and wind potential freshwater reserves, and coastal access make it the richest single landmass in raw natural wealth. The decisive factor is governance and industrial strategy. Countries that secure refining capacity, build regional rail and port networks, invest in education and protect shared assets become leaders. Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, DRC, Zambia, Botswana, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Angola, and Namibia. Each play distinct roles: energy, refining, mining, ports, agriculture, research, and finance. And together they form an interdependent system that converts raw resources into sustained power. The moment the rest of the world disappears, the old extractive order collapses. That is not suppression, it is liberation of potential. The question for the continent is whether it will use that potential to hoard wealth or to build a continent-wide economy that values refinement, technology transfer, and common infrastructure. The real story is not simple triumph or ruin. It is the choice to turn isolation into opportunity, to value human capital as much as mineral capital, and to remember that power without exchange can be powerful and empty at the same time. In every imagined future, the same truth returns. Africa has the resources to remake civilization, and the shape of the century that follows depends on how countries convert those resources into institutions, industries, and shared futures.